Just the other week, I used the word translucent when what I meant to say was transparent during one of my class discussions. Very different meanings. And it was a big mistake that I thought would be the most embarrassing of my educational career, considering as I'm an English major. It's really hard sometimes to remember that everyone makes mistakes, including famous astronomers that help discover the mysteries of space, such as the seasonal changes of Mars or the temperatures of Venus. This is somebody who advised NASA on various space expeditions, such as the Viking and interstellar mission with twin Voyagers 1 and 2, which we will discuss later. And he made science more accessible to the general public. And according to the 2023 Discover magazine article, he had over 600 scientific papers that he had written and 22 honorary degrees that he had earned during his career, which made him such a household name during his time. He also promoted the search for extraterrestrial life, which is going to be really important for you to remember, so don't forget that. And that he also had a curiosity-led decision he had made that led to the biggest mistake during his career. Today, we will be talking about astronomer Carl Sagan. First, we'll go over his contributions to science and astronomy as we know it. Then we'll move on to how he made science and astronomy more accessible and easier to understand to the general public. And then we'll finally get to how his passion of extraterrestrial intelligence led him to one of his biggest mistakes. So beginning with his discoveries and his contributions to science and astronomy. In 1966, seasonal changes on Mars were already known by NASA. They just didn't know how it happened or why. It was Carl Sagan and his peer James Pollock, who I'm sure you've heard of before, that theorized what it was seasonal winds kicking up dust off of the red planet and light refracting off of that dust that made it to where astronomers could see it from Earth. And during that same year, NASA's imaging team during their Mariner 9 orbiter were able to confirm that with their Viking. And Carl Sagan was on the team at the time to accept all credit, according to Cornell.edu. In 1977, the interstellar mission had begun, and in 1989, twin Voyagers 1 and 2 were declared as part of that mission, which again is really important to remember, so don't forget that. Backtracking a little bit to 1968, he was a professor at the Cornell University, and he was the director of the Laboratory of Planetary Studies. He was also very interested in exobiology, which is an actual thing now, but it wasn't then. So it is the study of the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence outside of Earth. And he is also the founder of that. So he had a passion for aliens. He also was the author of various novels that centered mostly around extraterrestrial intelligence, such as Cosmic Connection and Extraterrestrial Perspective that he wrote in 1973 and published. And he was also one of the 11 people to attend the Drake Equation meeting in 1961 in Green Bank, West Virginia. Now, this meeting was a meeting held at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and it was a meeting to discuss how many estimated detectable extraterrestrial or alien civilizations there were in the Milky Way, according to nasaonline.org. Now, moving on to how he became such a common household name at his time. From an early age, Sagan had always loved the sciences, and he had always spoken his knowledge to anybody that was willing to listen, and that carried on into his adulthood. And as he made his way through his career path, he made it a point to make sure that he found ways to bridge the gap between sciences and the general public. He wrote his own books. He starred on TV shows. He had a TV program of his own, and it was called Cosmos, A Personal Voyage. And he even wrote essays for Parade magazine. He felt so strongly about this that he also thought that maybe scientists should allot 10% of their time to public outreach programs. In his own words, he had been quoted by LOC.gov, quote, "We live in a time dominated by science and technology, and yet sometimes it seems that almost no one understands very much about science or technology," end quote. So this was a very important thing for him. So this is how he became the Bill Nye of his time. And actually, it's how Bill Nye can thank Sagan for being able to be the Bill Nye of Bill Nye's time. So, moving on, we're finally getting to the good stuff, what NASA doesn't want you to know about Carl Sagan. So remember his interest in extraterrestrial intelligence I had told you about? We're going to discuss that now. So his interest was less of a passion and more of an obsession. That West Virginia meeting that we had discussed in Green Bank, the Drake equation, he was 1 out of 11 to attend that meeting. And at that meeting is where he met John C. Lilly, who I encourage you to look him up because I can't talk too much about what he did. It's not class appropriate, but I encourage you to look it up. So during this meeting with John C. Lilly brought up to Sagan a proposal to use dolphins to speak English in the hopes of one day, if they did find extraterrestrial life, being able to use that information to also communicate with the aliens. Long story short, Sagan went for it, and Sagan was able to convince NASA to fully fund this dolphin project, and it is called the Dolphin Project. The project itself, again, I can't get too into considering that it's not class appropriate, but let's just say for 3 years, 3 dolphins were used and abused and given drugs that we now call acid or LSD, all in the hopes of getting them to speak English to one day use that to talk to aliens. And as the project went on, and as the project got hazier and hazier, according to Discover Magazine in 2018, I'm sorry, then Sagan had realized that maybe he had made a mistake and this was going nowhere and going awry. So John Sagan was forced to go back to NASA and explain to them, this isn't going the way we thought it was, and this was a mistake, we should pull our funds. And NASA did. So, what did we learn from all of this? What was the point of this speech? Well, we learned a lot about astronomy. I learned way more than I ever wanted to know about astronomy. And we also learned a lot about public relations and the sciences. But we also learned that no one is immune to mistakes. So if you ever felt like you made a mistake, whether in this class or in life in general, then always think it could be worse. You can convince an entire governmental program to fund abusing dolphins in order to get them to speak English to speak to aliens one day. Could always be worse.